on your afternoon, the next few minutes, looking back at your life can be like looking at another person sometimes, can't it? Whether that's because it's a pre and post children thing and life has been transformed, or maybe just I was an irresponsible madman back then. Or where on earth did I get that energy? But there's someone who's looking back on himself 10 years ago to the day, because then he was on a sea kayak paddling his way across Bass Strait. Please refer back to the madman, Tasmania. Spending a night on a giant catamaran can be hectic enough on Bass Strait. Trying to walk up a hallway while you're getting tossed from wall to wall. Or that big rise, and drop of big swell. But then there are these people who nestle into a sea kayak and face those waves under their own steam. Chris Elliott is reminiscing on a past life at the moment. It's a 10-year anniversary of his paddle across Bass Strait. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, does that young wild man seem like a different person now?
Yeah, he certainly does a little bit. I think they say that your cognitive development finishes when you're about 24,
Mm-hmm.
so I was definitely 4 years shy of that at the time. But I'd like to think I'm still the same adventurous person I was back then.
Do you remember the moment you decided to paddle across Bass Strait with a mate?
Yeah. So I was the younger of a party. I was 20 years old, pretty experienced marathon flat water racing kayak. So I was kind of the engine in the boat. Didn't have a huge amount of sea kayaking experience. I'd done it a little bit, but I was kind of paired up with an old sea dog, a 50-year-old bloke called Andrew, who was very experienced with sea kayaking, but needed a motor, so to speak. So he actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do this kayak across the strait?" And me being young and dumb and keen to prove myself, I suppose, we took him up on that.
How do you train for the potential of the waves you might face in Bass Strait?
We did lots of training, lots of sort of 20 to 40 kilometre paddles down the south of New South Wales, down around Batemans Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely needed some bit more practice with like rolling, so being able to right your kayak in the event of a capsize. And so doing that with a kayak that's burdened with a week of expedition equipment. It was definitely quite a learning curve there. So, and then lots of surf entry and exit because the wave is pretty big. Obviously, Bass Strait is a pretty notorious stretch of water.
Yeah, I mean, it wrecks ships.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the thing about it is because it used to be a land bridge back in the Ice Age or whatever. The depth of the water means that you just get these random breaking waves and the wind that rips through there just really drives up the swell. So I remember on one day we were crossing from Killiecrankie on the north end of Flinders Island to Deal Island, and the swell just all of a sudden kicked up. The weather was supposed to be okay, like certainly the swell was pointing in the right direction, but the weather just kind of turned about halfway across. There's a tiny little island called Craggy Island, which no one really stops at, but we had to kind of pull our boat in and just kind of get into the lee to get out of the swell for a little bit. And we were just kind of getting beaten up against the rocks a little bit. And there was a fishing boat actually about 10 to 15 kilometres away. So in the event of we actually needed to call a rescue, we probably would have to get help. But they looked like they were having a bit of a time in the swell as well. So.
Oh, jeez. How long were you prepared for it to take?
So because there's some islands hopping along the way, I mean, there's some remote islands that, I'll probably never visit again. So we wanted to make sure we had some days exploring those islands. So we spent the whole trip from Tasmania back to Wilson's Prom in Victoria was 11 days, but a lot of those days were spent on the islands. I think it was probably about 7 days of kayaking
do you plan for the weather when a trip's going to take that long?
The main thing we had with weather was we had a high frequency radio that basically beamed out to, I think, Longreach, and we would just get pretty regular weather updates, certainly every morning before we'd take off on any of the big sort of transoceanic stretches, I suppose you call them, where those are the big stretches where where you're in the middle of the ocean and you can't see any land either way. And so on those days, we definitely make sure we had a really detailed sense of what the weather was up to.
I'll stop asking you questions based out of my own fear now. This is Chris Elliott. He's based in Europe these days, but 10 years ago today, he was paddling his way across Bass Strait. What was one of the most enjoyable parts of it for you, Chris?
The most enjoyable parts, for sure, were the islands that we visited. So, in particular, there's one island called Deal Island, which is in the middle of Bass Strait, and you more or less, it might be pretty difficult to get there unless you're in a private vessel. And yeah, it's just remote. Apparently, there's like an endemic species of snake or something.
What?
And yeah, yeah. I mean, this is what I'm told. I'll have to check up on that. But yeah, just a really beautiful island in the middle of Bass Strait, absolutely buffeted by the wind and the ocean, completely wild, just, yeah, it's a pretty special place.
I would have thought it was all seals and albatross. I didn't imagine there'd be snakes.
I think they're non-venomous snakes. I'd have to double check on that one. But yeah, actually, and seals as well. There's another little, there's another rock sort of in the middle, way out to Deal Island. Called Right Rock, I believe. And it's just this tiny little rock in the middle of a 50-kilometre stretch of ocean where you haven't seen any land. And then halfway across, you just see this rock. An absolutely stank of seal poop. And so it was actually kind of funny because it was a real... it was quite comforting to see something resembling land because we hadn't seen anything land related for about an hour, and then so the smell of seal poop was actually kind of heartening.
Wow, that's not a description I've heard of seal poop before. Heartening.
No.
What was the scariest moment for you?
Probably getting definitely in the second half of the voyage. We were leaving a place called Erith Island and getting to Hogan Island, which is sort of one of the last island hops you can do before you do the last day to the mainland. And there was a line of breakers that were just completely... I still can't really explain it because the rest of the ocean was reasonably okay. It was probably only 2 meters swell. But then all of a sudden there was just this line of breakers coming off Erith Island for about a couple of kilometres to the north of it. And they just sort of appeared out of nowhere, and they were coming right across our bow. So there was a potential of a capsize then, which, wouldn't have been very fun at all. So we nearly got knocked over by one wave, but we kind of turned into it. It was coming across us, but we kind of turned to take it nose on and getting over that.
At any point did you think, I have made a terrible mistake?
Yeah, definitely, probably. Well, no, I wouldn't say a terrible mistake, but I would say it was more of just like you sort of having a intimate relationship with the possibility of your own demise.
Yeah.
Because even if we got into serious trouble and pulled the EPIR, pulled the emergency beacon, I mean, the water's quite cold, so you could, in some of those instances, you could probably end up with hypothermia and die, and that's what unfortunately happened to a really quite amazing kayaker who paddled to New Zealand and ended up in a situation. He was only 20 kilometres off the coast of New Zealand.
Yes.
And his kayak capsized and he disappeared. I mean, we weren't doing anything that extreme because he was paddling from Australia to New Zealand, so absolutely epic trip.
Yeah.
But there are definitely significant risks attached with these expeditions, for sure.
Chris, if you had your time over, would you do it again?
I don't know whether I'd do it now, to be honest. It's interesting looking back on it. that doesn't seem very appealing at all. but definitely the memories of it, and the places that we got to visit, Deal Island, these remote islands in the Furneaux group in the middle of Bass Strait. Like, they're just very few people get to experience those places. So I consider myself very lucky for having the opportunity to visit them.
What's life like now?
Life's pretty good. I sort of gave up the boat a little bit and got more into mountaineering and climbing. So yeah, that one, in some ways, it turned me off the big transoceanic crossings. I think kayaks are definitely designed for amphibious movement around beaches, less so for these massive ocean journeys. But so yeah, I decided to stick to land and just seek altitude instead, I suppose.
And career-wise, where have you headed?
I'm an academic. I'm an anthropologist at King's College London in the UK, and just studying humans.